I always thought I had life figured out. After all, I wasn't just another guy punching a clock. I built my business from the ground up, took risks that paid off, and turned a few lucky breaks into an empire. At 45, I had everything most men dream of. Wealth, influence, a house that belonged in magazines. And Lauren was different from anyone I'd ever met. Ambitious, sharp-witted, and effortlessly elegant. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when she spoke to you. I fell hard for her the moment we met, and somehow, despite all odds, she chose me. For over a decade, we were a team, building each other up, challenging each other, growing together. People said we had a marriage to admire. That's why I never saw it coming. Looking back, the signs were there, but when you trust someone completely, you don't think twice about the little things. I was busy with work, traveling for meetings, closing deals. Lauren had always supported me in that. Never complained about my long hours or sudden trips. She understood what it took to be successful because she was just as driven in her own way. For years, she focused on charity work and high-profile social events. But last year, something shifted. She told me she wanted to explore her passion for theater. It was something she had always loved, but never had the time for. I encouraged it, happy to see her excited about something new. It started as volunteering, then turned into managing events, and soon, she was working closely with actors and directors. That's when she met them, Adam and Vanessa, the kind of people who live by their own rules, who didn't believe in convention or boundaries. They were both striking. Adam, a charismatic actor who could charm anyone in the room, and Vanessa, his equally magnetic wife who seemed to thrive on the attention they both attracted. They had this presence about them, the kind that made people lean in closer, wanted to be part of whatever world they created. At first, Lauren only mentioned them in passing. Casual stories about rehearsals, inside jokes from the crew, late-night brainstorming sessions. I didn't think much of it. She was happy, glowing even, as she talked about the creative energy of the theater. It felt good to see her so passionate about something again. But then the changes started. Small things at first. Her phone, which she used to leave on the counter, was suddenly always face down. The late nights stretched longer. She started dressing differently. Not that I ever tried to control her style, but it was noticeable. Bolder choices, riskier. A side of her I hadn't seen before. And then there were the text messages. One night, as she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't the jealous type. I never needed to be. But something about the way she had been acting lately made me glance at the screen. A message from Vanessa. Tomorrow night's going to be unforgettable. Can't wait. I stared at it, my stomach tightening. It wasn't outright damning, but something about it felt off. I didn't say anything that night. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down I knew. Something was changing, and I wasn't sure I was ready to find out what. The first time I met Adam and Vanessa in person, I could see why people were drawn to them. They had this effortless way of commanding attention, as if they belonged to some secret world where rules didn't apply. Lauren had invited them over for dinner, excited for me to finally meet the couple she had been working so closely with. She had spent hours making sure everything was perfect. Candles lit, music playing softly in the background. Her dress just a little more daring than usual. When I opened the door, Adam greeted me with a firm handshake and an easy smile, the kind that made you instinctively want to trust him. Vanessa, on the other hand, held my gaze just a little too long before smirking, her fingers brushing lightly against my wrist as she walked inside. Dinner was lively, filled with stories of the theater and laughter that felt a little too rehearsed. Adam was charming, Vanessa even more so, but there was something beneath it all, an unspoken energy that made me feel like I was being tested. Then came the pool party. Lauren had insisted on hosting, saying it would be a fun way to unwind. I didn't think much of it. We had the space, and she loved entertaining. I came home that evening to find our backyard transformed. Tiki torches glowing, drinks flowing, music pulsing just loud enough to make conversation feel private. Adam and Vanessa arrived late. Vanessa wrapped in a silk cover-up that barely reached mid-thigh. She greeted me first, her arms looping around my neck in a way that felt too familiar, her perfume clinging to my skin long after she pulled away. "You've got a beautiful home, Alex," she purred, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "And a beautiful wife." Adam, meanwhile, had already found Lauren. They were talking in hushed tones by the bar, her head tilted toward him in that way that used to be just for me. I watched as he leaned in closer, his hand grazing the small of her back, the touch so casual yet so deliberate. And then Vanessa dropped her cover up. The conversation around us lulled for a brief second as she stood there in nothing but a barely there bikini, her confidence as bold as the outfit itself. She stretched, running a hand through her dark waves before stepping into the pool, eyes locking onto mine just before she submerged. I forced a laugh, shaking my head as I took a sip of my drink. But something about the moment made my skin crawl. It wasn't just flirting. It was something else entirely. Later that night, after the guests had left and Lauren was lazily swirling the last of her wine in her glass, she turned to me with a look I didn't quite recognize. "They're fascinating, aren't they?" she mused, her voice light, but her eyes sharp. "There's something," I replied carefully. She leaned in, running a finger along the rim of her glass. "I mean, don't you ever wonder about different dynamics?" I stilled, setting my drink down. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, but it felt forced. "I just mean some couples explore things outside of the usual definition of marriage. They have different experiences." I exhaled slowly, meeting her gaze. "Are you saying you want that?" She hesitated, then smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "No, I'm just saying it's interesting. That's all." But I knew that wasn't all. "Lauren," I said firmly, "if this is something you're even considering, you need to stop now. That's not us. That's never going to be us." Something flickered in her expression, disappointment, frustration, before she sighed and leaned back against the couch. "I was just talking, Alex. Relax." But I couldn't relax, because deep down, I knew this conversation wasn't over. I should have known something was wrong the moment Lauren told me she got the lead role. She came home that night practically glowing, her excitement bubbling over as she threw her arms around my neck. "I got it, Alex." "The lead," she beamed, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Adam pushed for me. He said I was perfect for it." I smiled, proud of her. "That's great, babe. You worked hard for this." But as she talked about the play, the way Adam fought for her to get the part, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the way she spoke about him, like he was the one making all the decisions, shaping her future. Or maybe it was the way she started spending more nights at rehearsals, coming home later and later, smelling like stage makeup and wine. I trusted her. I had to, but something gnawed at the back of my mind. Opening night arrived sooner than I expected. I sat in the front row, surrounded by donors, critics, and Lauren's friends, waiting for the play to begin. Adam, ever the showman, walked onto the stage before the curtain lifted, thanking the audience for coming. He made a point to highlight Lauren's talent, calling her the heart of this production. I watched as he glanced toward her backstage, a look passing between them that I didn't like. And then the play started. Lauren was breathtaking, commanding the stage with the kind of presence that made the audience hang on her every word. I was proud, until it happened. The scene. I knew about it, or at least I thought I did. When she first got the role, she told me there had been an intimate scene in the original script, but that it was cut early on. It didn't fit the story, she had assured me. Besides, I wouldn't have been comfortable with it. But now, right before my eyes, it was back. I watched in horror as Ben, her co-star, ran his hands over her body, pulling her close, whispering lines into her ear that weren't in the original script she had rehearsed with me at home. His lips brushed against her neck, his fingers trailing down her arm. And then, I felt my stomach drop. The moment stretched unbearably long. The scene so visceral, so intimate that I could feel the entire audience shift uncomfortably. Lauren wasn't acting anymore. She was trapped. I saw it in her eyes, the hesitation, the way she stiffened under Ben's touch. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The show had to go on. When the lights dimmed for intermission, I shot up from my seat, my fists clenched. Adam sat near the wings, watching the show like a king surveying his kingdom, a smug grin playing at his lips. I stormed past the murmuring crowd, pushing through the backstage doors. Lauren was standing there, still in costume, her face pale. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Alex, don't," I growled. "What the hell was that?" She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Adam sauntered up beside her, sipping from a champagne flute like nothing was wrong. "Alex," he drawled, grinning. "Wasn't that scene electric?" The chemistry was unbelievable. My vision blurred with rage. "You put that scene back in without her consent, didn't you?" I took a step toward him, my hands shaking. Adam tilted his head, feigning innocence. "Oh, come on. It was in the original script. The audience loved it. You saw them, right? This is art." Lauren flinched at his words, her hands trembling at her sides. I turned to her, my voice softer, but no less firm. "Tell me the truth. Did you agree to that?" She swallowed hard, glancing at Adam before shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "That was it. That was all I needed." My fist connected with Adam's jaw before I even realized I'd moved. He staggered back, his champagne glass shattering on the floor. "Jesus Christ," he shouted, holding his face, blood trickling from his lip. Ben appeared from the hallway, rushing over. "What the hell's going on?" I turned to him, my blood still boiling. "You," I spat. "You knew she wasn't okay with that, and you went along with it." Ben barely had time to react before my fist collided with his face, sending him crashing into a prop table. Gasps rang out from the crew, people scrambling to separate us. Lauren grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my wrist. "Alex, stop!" But I wasn't listening. "You let this happen." I seethed, glaring at Adam as he wiped the blood from his mouth. "You think you can control everything, manipulate people into playing your twisted games?" Adam chuckled, shaking his head. "You really don't get it, do you?" His voice was thick with amusement. "This isn't about control. This is about pushing boundaries, something you clearly can't handle." I lunged again, but two crew members grabbed me, pulling me back. "You're done," I snarled. "You hear me? You're done." Adam smirked, dabbing at his bleeding lip. "Funny," he murmured. "That's exactly what Lauren said about you." The words sliced through me like a blade. I turned to Lauren, my chest heaving. "What is he talking about?" She looked away, guilt pooling in her eyes. And that's when I knew. This betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. The moment I walked out of that theater, I knew I couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about what had happened on stage, it was everything. The way Adam smirked as if he had already won. The way Lauren hesitated before answering me, the guilt written all over her face. There was something deeper at play here, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse still pounding from the fight. My mind raced, replaying every suspicious moment over the last few months. The late nights, the sudden secrecy, the way she had started treating me like an afterthought while pretending nothing was wrong. And Adam's last words. "That's exactly what Lauren said about you." I wasn't stupid. I had spent my entire career reading between the lines, spotting hidden motives, uncovering deception. If there was something to uncover, I would find it. By the next morning, I had hired someone to do exactly that. Mike was a private investigator I had used before for business dealings, background checks on potential partners, verifying financial reports. This was different. "You want the full sweep?" he asked over the phone. "Everything," I said. "I want to know where she's been, who she's with, and what they're planning." "Spero no detalhe." "Got it," he said. "Give me a few days." I barely slept that week. Lauren acted like nothing had happened. as if we could move past my outburst at the theater. She was careful with her words, avoiding any direct confrontation, probably waiting for me to cool down. But I didn't. By the time Mike called me back, I was ready for war. "You're not gonna like this," he started. And that was when I knew. Lauren wasn't just cheating on me. She had been for a while. And not just with Adam. She's been involved with multiple guys, Mike continued. Obviously Adam, but also Ben and 4 other men from the theater. Some actors, some investors. It's extensive. I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of my desk. How long? From what I can tell, at least 6 months. Probably longer. 6 months. That meant while she was smiling at me over dinner, pretending everything was fine, she had been sneaking around with other men. She had been playing me for a fool. "That's not even the worst of it," Mike added. I braced myself. "What?" "She's planning to leave you," he said. "Not just leave, Run. To Dubai." I froze. She and Adam have been putting things in place for weeks. Flights, paperwork, housing arrangements. They're planning to disappear. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my mind trying to process what I was hearing. And one more thing, Mike hesitated. "They're planning to take $2.5 million from your accounts before they go." That snapped me out of my daze. "What?" "She's been making transfers, small amounts, keeping it under the radar. But Adam has access to offshore accounts, and from what I found, they're funneling money through different channels. It's careful, smart, but not smart enough." I slammed my fist on the desk, my jaw tightening. "That money isn't hers to take." Mike sighed. "I figured you'd say that, which is why I put a stop to it." "What do you mean?" "I had one of my guys flag the transactions and freeze any future transfers. She won't know yet, but when she tries to move the rest, it'll get blocked." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. They were stealing from me. Lauren, the woman I built a life with, was planning to rip me off and vanish like none of it ever mattered. "And there's one last thing," Mike said. "Lauren, she thinks you're cheating on her too." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she does. I found messages she sent to Adam, talking about how she knows you're seeing someone else. No proof, though. Just a hunch." I shook my head. She convinced herself of it so she could justify what she was doing. Pretty much. I took a deep breath, my rage simmering beneath the surface. "Mike, yeah, I want you to find out everything. Every detail. I don't care how much it costs." There was a pause. "What are you planning to do?" I looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. "Expose them," I said. "Every last one of them." I had spent years building my empire on strategy, knowing when to strike and when to wait. And this was just another deal, except instead of stocks and acquisitions, I was dismantling the people who had betrayed me. It took me 2 weeks to prepare everything. 2 weeks of watching Lauren act like nothing had changed, her lies stacking higher with each passing day. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still asked about my meetings, still curled up next to me at night like she wasn't planning to run away. But I wasn't just waiting. I was setting the trap. The night of the next performance was perfect. A full house, VIP guests, donors, media personalities, all gathered to watch the play that had started this mess. Lauren had no idea that by the time the final curtain fell, her life as she knew it would be over. I had hired a team, lawyers, investigators, even a few reporters who owed me favors. While the audience was watching the show, my people were backstage preparing. Copies of the evidence were placed in thick envelopes, one for each person involved, names printed on the front. The moment the cast stepped off stage, they would be handed their fate. I sat in the front row, watching Lauren deliver her lines flawlessly, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Adam, standing across from her on stage, played his part with the same smug arrogance he always carried. Ben was there too, delivering his lines with that same fake charm. They thought they had won. When the final applause filled the theater, I leaned back in my seat and smiled. The moment they exited the stage, it began. The stage manager, a man I had paid generously for his assistance, intercepted them as they stepped into the wings. He handed each of them an envelope, his face unreadable. "What's this?" Adam asked, flipping his open. Then silence. I stood from my seat and made my way backstage, just as the chaos erupted. Adam's face went pale as he read through the legal documents. An airtight lawsuit for $5 million for fraud, breach of contract, and theft. He sputtered, looking around in confusion, but there was no escape. Ben's reaction was even better. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages detailing his cybercrimes, fraudulent transactions, illegal hacking, and identity theft, all neatly compiled and traced back to him. I had given the documents to a cybersecurity specialist who ensured it was airtight. If Ben didn't want to spend time behind bars, he'd have to cut a deal. But it was Lauren who gave me the most satisfaction. She barely made it through the first few pages before her hands started shaking. The full breakdown of her affairs, the financial transactions I had intercepted, the messages detailing her plan to run away with Adam. And the best part? The breakdown of her divorce settlement. She had expected to walk away with $3 million. Instead, she was getting only $400,000. Just enough to make sure she couldn't claim I had left her with nothing, but nowhere near enough for her grand escape. Her lips parted, her breath hitching. Then she collapsed. The sound of her body hitting the floor sent a ripple of panic through the cast and crew. People rushed to her side, calling her name, shaking her shoulders. But I just stood there, watching as the weight of her betrayal came crashing down on her. Adam tried to lunge at me, his face red with fury. "You did this, you son of a—" I didn't even flinch. "That lawsuit isn't just about the money, Adam. It's about making sure you never work in this industry again." Ben had already bolted, his phone pressed to his ear, probably trying to call a lawyer. But there was no escaping what I had on him. As Lauren was helped onto a chair, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, her face filled with something I hadn't seen in years. "Fear. You ruined me," she whispered. I crouched down to her level, my voice low, so only she could hear. "No, Loudon, you ruined yourself." Then I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked away. Because this game, I had already won. In the months that followed, everything changed. Lauren was gone, along with the life I had built with her. The house felt different without her, quieter, cleaner, lighter. At first, I thought the silence would drive me mad, but as the weeks passed, I realized something. I didn't miss her. Not really. What I had been clinging to wasn't love. It was the idea of what we used to be. And that version of us had died a long time ago. The divorce was finalized quickly. She tried to fight for more, of course, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. She walked away with her $400,000, humiliated and outcast from the social circles she once thrived in. I never heard from her again. But Vanessa was a different story. I ran into her about a month after the chaos, at an upscale lounge downtown. She looked different, sharper, more confident, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Adam was out of the picture. She had left him the moment my lawsuit landed on his desk, realizing that the man she thought she loved had been manipulating her just as much as he had manipulated Lauren. We sat at the bar that night, talking for hours. For the first time, there were no games, no unspoken agendas. Just two people who had been burned by the same fire, finding comfort in the fact that neither of us had to go through it alone. One drink turned into three, then dinner, then late-night conversations that stretched into the morning. Before I knew it, Vanessa had become a constant in my life. And unlike Lauren, she never made me question where I stood. Our relationship wasn't built on secrets. There were no lies, no hidden messages, no manipulation. Just honesty, passion, and a deep understanding of what it meant to start over. A year later, I proposed. It wasn't a grand spectacle. No dramatic gestures or elaborate setups. Just the two of us on a quiet evening, sitting on my balcony overlooking the city. I pulled out the ring, held her hand, and simply asked, "Do you want to build something real with me?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. As for Lauren, I never saw her again. I heard rumors. about her trying to rebuild her life, about failed ventures and burned bridges. But she never reached out, and I never looked for her. Still, I wasn't completely heartless. Before I closed the book on that chapter of my life, I made a final decision. In my new business, I left her 2% of the shares. A small percentage. A symbolic gesture. Not enough to make her rich, but just enough to remind her of the life she threw away. Vanessa never questioned it. She understood. And with that, I moved forward. Because in the end, revenge wasn't what satisfied me. It was knowing that I had finally found something real. Ben's trial was quick, almost too easy. The evidence against him was airtight: bank fraud, hacking, identity theft. He had tried to play it cool at first, acting like he could find a way out, but the moment the guilty verdict was read, reality crashed down on him. 10 years behind bars. I followed the case out of curiosity, checking the occasional headline. Apparently, prison life didn't suit him. 6 months in, he got into a fight over a gambling debt and ended up with 2 more years tacked onto his sentence. A fitting end for a man who thought he could con his way through life. As for Adam, he vanished. After Vanessa left him and my lawsuit drained him financially, he tried to charm his way into another marriage, but that one crashed and burned just as quickly. Rumors swirled about him bouncing between cities, trying to reinvent himself under different names, but nothing ever stuck. The last I heard, he had moved overseas alone and irrelevant. A man who once thrived on being the center of attention, now reduced to a ghost. Good riddance. But none of that mattered anymore, because I had everything I wanted. Vanessa and I got married in a quiet ceremony, nothing flashy or extravagant. Just close friends, good wine, and a promise that this time, we were doing things right. Standing there, looking at her, I realized I had never felt this certain about anything in my life. She wasn't just someone I loved, she was someone I trusted. That was what mattered. A year passed, and life settled into something peaceful, something real. The business was thriving. My personal life was no longer a battlefield. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. And then, one evening, as we were having dinner on the balcony, Vanessa placed her hand over mine, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." She exhaled a small laugh, shaking her head. "Not serious, just life-changing." And in that moment, I knew. I didn't need her to say the words. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she reached for me, in the warmth behind her smile. I laced my fingers through hers, a slow grin spreading across my face. "Vanessa," I murmured, "are you telling me?" She nodded. And just like that, everything I had lost, everything I had suffered faded into the past. Because this was my future, and I couldn't wait to live it.